From VOA Learning English, this is the Health Report. Researchers have developed a medical device which they say can recognize malaria infections in the human body. The laser beam scanner is said to be the first device to identify the disease without a blood test. The test is painless, does not require blood from the sick person, and appears to be correct every time. At present, doctors use costly equipment to test for malaria. The new test only needs a person to place a finger on the laser device. Dr. Dmitry Lopatko is with Rice University in Houston, Texas. He says the scanner works by shining a very short pulse of light through the skin. The light comes from a low-powered laser. It shines on a very small particle called the hemozoan. The malaria parasite produces hemozoan when it infects red blood cells. Hemozoan crystals are not found in blood cells that are free of the disease. As the laser heats the crystals, they create small bubbles inside infected cells. Dr. Lopatko says the bubbles explode, making a sound that scientists can hear and count. He says that in tests, the laser scanner was never wrong. It also identified the malaria infection early, when treatment is important. The device is easy to carry and operates on battery power. It costs about $10,000 to $20,000 to make. Dr. Lopatko estimates that each laser beam scanner could test more than 200,000 people a year. He says that means the cost of testing would be less than 50 cents for each patient. An article describing the malaria testing device was published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Persutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. Two large internet companies, Facebook and Google, recently bought two smaller India-based technology companies. India is home to thousands of computer software engineers and a growing information technology industry. The sales of the smaller companies are expected to influence others in India to launch technology businesses. Facebook closed its deal to buy Little Eye Labs in January. 4 engineers in the city of Bangalore launched Little Eye Labs about a year and a half ago. The company builds mobile application software tools. The deal is said to be worth between $10 and $15 million. The second deal involved Google and Imperium, a cybersecurity company. Imperium has offices in Bangalore and the American state of California. Media reports say that deal was valued at $9 million. The two deals are considered small but important. Experts say they will help increase interest in Indian startups among foreign technology companies. Such businesses often by small companies, either for the technology they develop or the skills and ideas of their creators. Rutvik Doshi is with an investment company in Bangalore. He says if both deals are successful, Facebook and Google will then start looking at India for more skilled workers and new businesses. Indian software engineers have gained recognition around the world. Most of the engineers work for big Indian technology companies. But the number of Indian technology startup companies is increasing. The success that the industry has created will help open the door to future growth. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. India is hoping its economy will improve in the weeks to come. Over the past 2 years, economic growth dropped to the lowest levels in recent years. Gurdeep Singh grows crops on about 40 hectares of productive land in the northern state of Punjab. Mr. Singh says he plans to buy a new and bigger tractor to make his work easier. He also hopes to buy a car after he pays the loans for his farm equipment. Vishnu Mathur is the head of the Society of Automobile Manufacturers of India. He says there is a weak demand in cities for passenger cars. But he says economic gains in rural areas could help car makers. This expression of hope in the automobile industry may be a sign that the worst could be over for the Indian economy. Experts believe the 2013 economy will show less than 5% growth when the financial year ends in March. Rafiq Ahmed is head of the Federation of Indian Export Organizations. He says exports are growing because of the devalued rupee and better economic conditions worldwide. Indians' money, the rupee, lost more than 20% of its value compared to the United States dollar last year. The Indian economy is widely expected to grow, yet economists say it is unlikely to reach the 9% growth seen just 3 years ago. Finance Minister P. Chidambaram has said the economy will expand at a rate of more than 6% in 2014. Economists say trust among investors, both in India and in other countries, must return before the Indian economy can improve. Many investors are waiting to see who will lead India after national elections to be held by May. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carla Babb.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. Most people spend little time thinking about the act of walking, but millions of people around the world are not able to walk, not even one step. Now, a new wearable robot may change that. Bob Emilio leads a basketball team called the Freewheelers. His players are unable to walk. They use wheelchairs to move around. The Freewheelers play their games in eastern Pennsylvania. But recently, Bob Emilio did something he has not done in 26 years: walk. Before he attempted walking, Bob's physical therapist measured him. They prepared him for a high-tech device that would lift him out of his wheelchair and tell his legs to move. The device is a wearable robot called the Bionic Exoskeleton. People who weigh 100 kilograms or less may be able to wear the exoskeleton. When the therapist touched a button, the exo pushed Bob forward and up. Then battery-powered motors acted as his muscles, forcing his legs to move. Russ Angold is co-creator of the company called Exobionics. He says people using the device still put their own weight on their bone structure. The exo, he says, only provides the ability to move. Kevin Olt already uses the device. He says it changed his life by giving him hope where he had none before. The company says everyone who is healthy and has permission from a doctor has walked the first time they wore the exoskeleton. After using the device, Bob Emilio was looking forward to his next walk with his daughter on the day she is to be married. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. The western United States is not getting enough rain or snowfall. The dry area includes the state of California. Many of the fruits and vegetables eaten in the U.S. are grown there. Andy Domenigoni is a farmer in the California community of Riverside. His father, grandfather, and great-grandfather all farmed in the same area. Andy Domenigoni says farmers have good and bad years, and this is one of the bad years. He recently took a VOA reporter to a field where seeds were planted a month earlier. There were no signs of plants growing. Riverside is not the only area waiting for rain. Bill Pulsert is a climatologist at NASA, the U.S. Space Agency. He says drought conditions in western and southwestern states have been getting worse for the past 10 years. He says many farmers are selling their cattle and other animals because of the lack of water. He adds that Southern California is dealing with the worst drought since officials began keeping records more than 130 years ago. Milt McGiffin is a field crop expert at the University of California. He says the drought in California will affect many people for years to come. He says food prices will be higher and less food will be produced. He says that as the population increases, the amount of water for each person is decreasing. Mr. McGiffin says that cannot continue. And he says a technology solution is urgently needed. A United Nations report says world food prices in 2013 were among the highest ever. Experts agree that there is no easy answer to the problem of making sure farmers have enough water to grow their crops. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Public universities in Nigeria have reopened after a nearly 6-month-long strike by teachers. Repeated strikes can add months, even years, to the time it takes a student to finish a study program. Students at public universities across Nigeria say they are worried about exams and completing their project work. The Academic Staff Union of Universities, a labor group, suspended the strike in December. Part of the settlement was a government promise to invest billions of dollars during the next 5 years in university buildings and equipment. The government said that soon 25% of the nation's budget will be spent on education. Some teachers say the strike was really about pushing the government to make Nigeria's universities better. Laz Ematike is with Delta State University. He says the strike was not only to improve conditions for university teachers, but was meant to help everyone. He says better science laboratories and other improvements will let Nigeria compete with other parts of the world. Countries throughout Africa, not just Nigeria, are considering how to answer the exploding demand for admission to universities. These countries must also improve academic values and requirements and find ways to pay teachers enough to keep them. Hundreds of thousands of students pass college entrance exams every year, but many cannot attend public universities because there are not enough classrooms or teachers. University lecturers say they will be watching to make sure their schools get and effectively use the money the Nigerian government has promised. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Recently, there have been increased efforts to make sure children in Africa get a good, strong education. But a new report says governments are losing about $129 billion every year on poor quality education. As a result, about 1 in 4 students in poor countries cannot read a complete sentence. That represents about 175 million young people. The report comes from UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It says poor teacher training and spending cuts are just 2 of the reasons for schools failing. Pauline Rose, an education specialist, directed the report. She says more teachers are needed in African countries south of the Sahara Desert. She says the area needs an additional 225,000 teachers a year to improve primary school education by 2015. Pauline Rose says governments like saving money by using contract teachers. These teachers are not government employees, but work by special agreement. Contract teachers can easily be dismissed. In addition, they earn far less money than teachers working for the government. The UNESCO report says governments will need to increase spending on education. In many countries, financial support for education has decreased or stayed the same in recent years. The report praises some countries. It says South Africa provides 6 times more money to teach students in areas with low education levels and high unemployment. And Malawi is creating teacher colleges to train teachers for rural areas. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. 3 United Nations agencies are spending a lot of time and money to bring financial services to poor people in Africa. The agencies want to help the poor become less dependent on aid. But some people are wondering whether the UN efforts can lead to changes. The agencies want financial services such as credit, savings, and insurance made available to everyone. That includes poor people in Africa's rural areas. Some people there live on only $2 a day. Eartharin Cousin works for the World Food Program. She says the WFP is hoping to create jobs in agriculture that continue after the agency ends its involvement. The 2 other UN agencies are the Food and Agriculture Organization and the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Representatives of all 3 agencies were recently in Ethiopia. The country is home to more than 84 million people, but more than 80% of the population lives in rural areas. The FAO gives seeds and fertilizer to farmers. Local groups then buy what the farmers have grown with money that comes indirectly from the International Fund for Agricultural Development. And the World Food Program provides money to schools so they can buy locally grown food to serve their students. Another part of the program teaches financial literacy. It urges those living on a few dollars a day to use part of that money not for daily needs, but to save or invest. Queen Maxima is the UN's special advocate for financial inclusion. She says knowing how to start saving money is important for future investments. Ethiopia does not have a strong financial services industry. Only 8% of the population saves money in a bank. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Federal officials in the United States are asking drug companies to discontinue the use of some antibiotics meant for farm animals. Antibiotics are medicines used to fight infections caused by bacteria. Farmers around the world often use the drugs to make healthy animals grow faster and eat less feed. Farmers put antibiotics in the food and water they give cows, pigs, and birds, such as chickens. Critics say feeding antibiotics to farm animals lets bacteria develop resistance to such drugs. They say this makes the drugs less effective when they are used to fight diseases in humans. Last year, the Food and Drug Administration asked the drug companies to voluntarily change the directions for antibiotics sold for use in farm animals. Farmers will be required to stop using the drugs to make animals bigger. The FDA also wants to require medical supervision when antibiotics are used in farm animals for health needs. Some activists dispute the agency's decision to request rather than order the manufacturers to cooperate. Some large drug companies have already agreed to make the changes. Dmitry Drakonya is a doctor with the Infectious Diseases Society of America. He supports the FDA's decision to ask for voluntary changes, but he is not sure that all drug companies will cooperate. The National Pork Producers Council says hog farmers plan to change their use of antibiotics. The group says its members will limit the use of antibiotics to when they are medically necessary. But it says the changes mean farmers will have more sick animals. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Health Report. The World Health Organization has declared the Pakistani city of Peshawar the world's largest reservoir of polio virus. And WHO officials fear Pakistanis could face travel restrictions unless steps are taken immediately to stop the disease from spreading. Researchers studied all the cases of poliomyelitis reported in Pakistan last year. They found that almost every case could be linked genetically to the polio virus often reported in Peshawar. Polio mainly affects children under 5 years of age. The virus is passed through food or water. The virus reproduces in the body and later invades the nervous system. The disease can lead to loss of muscle control in part of the body. The WHO study found that 90% of Pakistan's polio cases could be linked to the virus in Peshawar. In addition, 12 of the 13 polio cases in Afghanistan were also linked to the city. Elias Dorey serves as the WHO's emergency coordinator for polio in Pakistan. He says local officials need to take urgent action to strengthen polio vaccination campaigns. He says the situation in Peshawar threatens the gains Pakistan has made against polio. And he warned it could also harm international efforts to end the disease. He also noted an increase in attacks on vaccination workers in Peshawar and other areas. Taliban militants often attack polio workers in Pakistan. The militants accuse them of being American spies or part of a plot to keep Muslims from having babies. Most of the attacks have taken place in Peshawar. The city is close to Pakistan's tribal districts. Extremist groups operate bases in those areas. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.